In this episode of the Sam Oldham podcast, I'm joined by Clay Stevens of the 2022 Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. He helped the Australian team finish fourth, and he finished within the top 12 all around. Clay's had an incredible career but faced many injuries throughout his time as a professional gymnast. He's had 6 surgeries, and with the Olympic Games being held in Brisbane in 2032, it's a very exciting time to be an Australian athlete. I'm really excited to have him with us today. Clay, thanks for joining us, mate. This is going to be a great conversation. I'm super excited. Having done a little bit of research about your career, and like we mentioned before we went live, yesterday I was training with your friend Hamish Carter, who was with you out at the Illinois University. And when I told him that we were going to be having this conversation, his eyes lit up and he was very excited. And I think that's because you've got such an amazing story, mate. So thanks for joining us.
No, thank you very much for having me, Sam. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to chatting with you for a while, so I'm very pumped to be here.
Yeah, and also, Clay, we're on the other side of the world, so it's nighttime. I can see it's dark outside, so thanks for making the effort, mate. I always appreciate. I would have never expected you to fly to the studio in Nottingham. Maybe one day, if we're on the level of the Joe Rogan podcast or something like that, we'd be able to do that. But thanks for making the effort, mate. I really appreciate it. Just to start off with, Clay, because we're going to get into your gymnastics story, just tell me a little bit about what you've been doing recently. You told me that you'd been out to Nepal. Can you just explain a bit about what that experience was all about for you and why you chose to do that at this point in time?
Yeah, well, actually, it started back in 2023. I decided that I wanted to do a trip outside of sort of gymnastics. Obviously, as you're very aware, a lot of our trips as athletes ends up being a trip to a competition, and there's a lot of travel. There's not a lot of sort of exploring outside of the gymnastics hall. So I also was looking to do something sort of towards my self-development and self-growth. So I planned a trip out to Africa to do a hike up Mount Kilimanjaro. So I ended up doing that with my 2 brothers. And off the back end of that, I gained so much. There was a lot of self-awareness that I gained, sort of dropped the phone for a whole week and just climbed up the mountain, which was awesome. But the one thing I felt that was missing was giving back to the communities that provided that opportunity for me in Africa. And obviously you pay the guides and pay everyone tips and all that sort of stuff. But there was just still that feeling of, I've gained so much from this and I don't feel like I've given enough back. So after enjoying the trip so much, I then planned a trip to Nepal to do some trekking through the Himalayas. So did a big trek through there, summited 2 mountains again, sort of just to challenge myself outside the gym, finding some sort of challenges that felt rewarding other than just, aiming for that gold medal of what I've been doing since I was 5 years old. And but sort of in conjunction with that, wanted to make sure I did something for those local communities. So in the last 12 months, I've been running a fundraiser alongside a friend of mine. And so basically we were fundraising to build a classroom in Nepal, and recently just got back from Nepal after going there for a little while with my partner, and we set up shop there and just built the classroom for a few days hands on, and so back classroom's built and it's up and running. So that's sort of what I've been doing on that side of things. It's been great.
That's amazing, mate. What did you gain from that, Clay? I've never done a trek like that, but when I went traveling with my partner in South America, like one of the best parts of the trip for me was we climbed up to Machu Picchu, and we did a big trek, like a 5-day trek through the mountains. And I just loved that quiet alone time by myself. What was it that you really gained from maybe that first trip with your brothers, which sounds amazing? I have a little brother, and I'd love to do something like that with him. That then made you want to do something similar again in the Himalayas, because I think one of my old teammates, Christian Thomas, you might remember him. He did an ultra marathon recently, and I was like, that sounds so frightening, spending 8 hours inside your head with no distractions. And he was like, yeah, it was pretty tough mentally. What did you gain from those experiences, Clay, that maybe led you to want to do that again when you went to Nepal recently?
The answer to that one's probably twofold, I think. So firstly, the act of actually achieving something really difficult outside of the sport. I think as an athlete, as a gymnast, you spend your whole life sort of fighting to try to be the best you can be and sort of get to the top of the podium or make that next team or make the next competition. And I think for me, I graduated university and obviously high school. I've achieved other things, but never had that satisfaction that gymnastics gives me. So being able to reach the top of the mountain was the first time that I actually felt this sense of achievement intrinsically. And that was just a massive eye-opening moment for me to realize that there is possibility outside of sport to achieve something and to feel some sense of worth and feel a sense of purpose and direction and that sort of stuff. So that was invigorating for me because, again, not having felt that before anywhere other than in the gym, it was awesome to be able to prove to myself that that was possible. And I guess the other side of what I gained out of the experience was exactly about the head noise you're talking about, is being able to sit there and just hear the shuffle crunch of my feet at 1 a.m. in the morning as you're trekking for 8 hours straight up a hill. There's nothing to notice, especially when it's pitch black at 1 a.m. before the sun comes out. There's nothing to notice but what's going on in your body and in your mind. And I think that was a period of time where I really started to acknowledge the amount of head noise that comes in, and gave me a bit of perspective on how that might actually, seep into the gymnastics and all of my other driving factors in my life, and made me appreciate the fact that there is a space where you need to be able to listen to what's going on, but not necessarily jump on and grab onto it and hold on to it. It was the moments that up that mountain where you initially thought, I wonder how long I've been going for, or I wonder how long's left, or when's the next break. It was actually those moments that provided the most suffering for me. And it was when I could actually relieve myself from those thoughts, and not that they weren't coming, but not grasp onto them and just let them come and then go. That I actually found myself in a bit more of a flow state. And it just made me realize the amount of times we all are just in our own heads. Thoughts come in, we grab onto them, we don't let them go. And it's the amount of suffering that we go through on a day-to-day basis. And then in the gym and trying to achieve these goals, there's so much suffering that we can mitigate just on learning how to be mindful of what's going on, and not be attached to what's happening. So I learned that, and I was just addicted to it straight away, and thought I've got to challenge myself even harder and see if I can actually do this in a really extreme situation, which is why I decided to actually summit the top of some mountains and do some proper ice peak kind of climbing. So
yeah, that's amazing, mate. It's so exciting. How did maybe working in the school and building the classroom and being around those children maybe change your perspective a little bit, Clay? Like, I remember a moment towards the end of my career really realizing it's about like the kids and just that joy and that passion, that kind of that bright-eyed dreaming of something bigger than yourself as a child when you start. And there's no competitions, there's no trying to win medals. You don't really understand that. You don't have a concept of that. Sport becomes very, very quickly becomes very serious, I think. And the play can get lost within it. What did you learn maybe from spending the time there, building that classroom in Nepal, that has potentially helped you? I know it's only a short time since you've been back, but maybe prior to that, even doing that first trip in Africa, that's helped your perspective when it comes to approaching your gymnastics?
Yeah, all of my life has been about high performance, right? So there's so many boxes you need to tick, and it's about being the top 1% of the top 1%. And I think doing some of these trips and seeing how some of these people live and still how they bring love and affection and care to the people around them was really intriguing to me, because so we're all fighting for the top, and you got these people that seemingly are living at the bottom and they're bringing so much happiness and joy and all this sort of stuff. So one of the things I thought was, how could I, instead of trying to help people at this point or myself through a high performance environment, how do I give the platform or do a small piece of work that can provide other people to potentially one day achieve those sort of things? So in Nepal, it's about safety and education and bringing some sort of hope because of the natural disasters and stuff that they go through. So building this classroom in school was much about building a foundational space where kids can feel safe and that they can build on their educational endeavors and things like that. So it took it down a notch. It went from high performance to, reality, really. Yeah. And it's just intriguing to look at how can someone pursue high performance if they don't have a foundational, a safe place to be. So yeah, that was really cool for me. And then also, I think with the perspective piece, it's really interesting. Again, we talk about high performance sport. As much as it gives to the people that watch it, and it does give back, and you can give inspiration and things like that, on the day-to-day as an athlete, especially in a sport that's not inherently a team sport, it is a lot of things you do are selfish. You think about what you're going to eat, you think about what time you're going to go to bed, you think about what time you're going to wake up, what's your training schedule, and these sort of things. And I think to give a bit of time where while you're over there, there's it's not about you at all. It's you're giving everything back. So coming straight off the back of World Championships, where again it was about my performance and how do I make sure I'm performing as well as I could, to then completely flip the coin there and go, well, how can I provide something that has really got nothing to do with me and just provide these opportunities to others was a nice, it's a nice sort of ebb and flow in creating balance in my high performance life at the moment.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, mate. I do feel like when you're in an individual sport, it very much is and has to be to an extent if you're trying to be the top 1% of the 1%, a very selfish way to live your life. And you have to almost untrain that and rewire your brain as you transition maybe out of the sport and you retire, because the reality is it's not necessarily the most useful person to be around in normal society. Someone that's so cutthroat and ruthless and sees the world very binary, you know. That was something I had to relearn when I retired. I was like, oh, wow, me being this incredibly competitive athlete type character is maybe quite off-putting for other people when you're just operating in normal life. Actually, people just want you to be fun and be around them. And I've certainly learned that being a dad. I've certainly learned that being a dad now.
I can imagine.
Clay, when I was reading your story about how you got into gymnastics, I read that you were part of like a specific talent identification process. What time was that, Clay? What year was that you started gymnastics?
I started when I was 5 years old, so that was in 2002. So basically, it is called the sort of high performance talent identification program. If I'm honest, I think it's a little bit more like Gymnastics South Australia. We're struggling for numbers. They're going around to schools and they're just trying to pick up as many kids as they can to increase the numbers. But what it then looked like is you sort of get put straight into the high performance stream. You get, I can't remember exactly how long it is, maybe 6 months or so, and then they start cutting. So they start cutting people, and when I say cutting, they start distributing them to the clubs. But the high performance athletes that they think's got that they have potential, they'll keep in the high performance program. So I kept making the cut. Basically, is how it went. And there was probably a group of 10 of us or so at the time. So that's how it all started.
Yeah, I guess the reason I asked, Clay, is that when I was growing up, I never watched the Sydney Olympic Games live in 2000 because I was pretty young and I only started gymnastics at the end of that year, so I missed that Olympic Games being somebody that was involved in gymnastics. But I do remember in the years that followed, Australian sport was considered of like the highest level, and that they had real robust systems, great funding, amazing training centres. And I just asked that because it felt like the fact that there was some kind of talent identification system in place was maybe reflective of the sports system in Australia at that time. And the fact that you said you started in 2002, just 2 years past Sydney. Obviously Sydney was massive for Australia, and even if you look at the results Australia continued to have, probably up until Commonwealth Games then in Melbourne in 2006, specifically in our sport, it was such a strong team. I just wondered what the system, I know you were very young at that time, but could you explain what the sports system was like in Australia post-Sydney, maybe up until 2006, and whether that's changed now that you're an older man and you're still involved in the sport?
Yeah, well, I won't claim to know a whole lot about it, if I'm honest, but basically through that period, through my whole life, sport has just been an integral part of Australian culture. So being a part of sport in Australia is such an important part to the communities and to everyone. So it's always been well regarded. Some sports more than others. Obviously, we have Australian football over here, which is just a massive part of the Australian culture, which is great. But as far as gymnastics is concerned, we had a high performance centre, which each state sort of had one for gymnastics. And again, there were clubs that filtered into that high performance centre. And then that's where I was training with some of the guys that went to Melbourne 2006 Commonwealth Games and beyond, and won some medals and stuff there. So I guess training for me at a young age in the same gym as guys that were achieving all the things that I was starting to learn that I wanted to eventually achieve was an awesome stepping stone. I think probably having that visibility to athletes like that was really important for me. And I think probably really important for everyone that's going through that sort of developmental phase in their sporting career.
And you clearly remember being around those guys, Clay, that were super successful, even Delhi as well. I think the Australian team win the gold medal there in Delhi? as a team. So
Yeah, they did.
2006, 2010, like that whole generation, very successful, very competitive as a team on the world stage. 2006, you've got Philip Rizzo winning the world high bar title. So super competitive at that time. Do you remember growing up around these guys? Were you inspired by a lot of them? Was there anybody in particular that you looked up to as an inspiration as you were growing up and developing them within the sport?
Yeah, when I was around that sort of age, around that 5 years old, all the way up to 12, I was sort of had my fingers in a lot of pies as far as the sport's concerned. I was doing a lot of different sports. So as far as my experience, I was very sort of focused on having fun, having to crack and that sort of stuff. But I do very specifically remember one of the guys in my gym, Sam Offord, he's part of the Delhi team, won a medal in the team, but also won a rings gold medal as well. And he also won a medal, I believe, maybe even 2 medals at Melbourne 2006. So I very much remember him, and in my gym community, he was and still is a massive inspiration to a lot of people. So I think my circle was quite small. I wasn't at that point looking out on the world stage. I think maybe that is because I had someone that was achieving those things in my gym. I didn't have to look very far for it, so I was very lucky in that sense. So, but as far as sort of broadening my vision on what the world of gymnastics was doing, I was a bit of a late bloomer to that. I had my goals and I wanted to be competing on the world stage, but for whatever reason, I was always very much focused on what was going on in my gym.
And at what point, Clay, did it start to become obvious that you had a real talent for the sport of gymnastics and you were starting to get some success nationally within Australia?
Probably 11 or 12. I think 11. When I was 11 years old was my first national championships, and I came away with a bunch of medals. And it was that point where I was like, oh, okay, well, this is pretty cool. It was the first test that I'd had anywhere outside of South Australia. South Australia, as far as numbers is concerned, isn't a massive state for gymnastics or any sport for that matter, compared to, say, the Sydneys and Melbourne and even up in Queensland. So after that was a pretty big sort of eye-opening moment. And then leading into the next year for under-12s was a year where I had a decent amount of pressure on me because I competed in the under-12s when I was 11. Going into the next year, I was sort of the favourite to win. So there was a lot of pressure on me, and I was able to come out with the national title when I was 12 years old. And I think at that point it was kind of like, all right, this is something worth pursuing here. I think I got something. Well, I don't know what it is, but I got something.
What is it, do you think, Clay? When I think about sport in like England and Australia love competing against each other. And sport is like such a massive part of the culture, and it's very competitive. And I grew up in a household where my family would watch every sport. So like my dad would have cricket on, rugby on, football on, athletics on. Sport would be on TV all the time. And he would teach me about these rivalries that we would have as English athletes or English people and British athletes. What do you think it is within the culture in Australia that makes sport such a big deal and a big part of that? Do you think it's potentially, I would say the weather, right? You've got such great weather, and everybody thinks of Australians being very healthy and very fit and in shape. What do you think it is that's part of that culture that makes sport such a big part of being an Australian?
Well, I think that's a massive part of it, I think, yeah. Like, so the weather here, most of the sports that are popular in Australia are all outdoor sports. I think it's, for whatever reason, I don't know what the underlying reason is, but it just seems to bring everyone together. Everyone loves watching sport. That's sort of probably our biggest sports are the team sports, which sort of fits in that narrative as well. We are very good as a country at swimming as well. That might be the weather as well. Everyone from the get-go is out swimming. A lot of Australian, well, almost all of the Australian major cities are on the coast. So it's something about the lifestyle. It's something about the way that we just get into sport and activity really early. Other than that, I'm not sure. It's a great question. I haven't really thought about it too much, but it is. I find myself very, very lucky for being brought up in a country like Australia for so many reasons. One of them being how big, popular and supported sport is here.
Yeah, I guess the reason I asked that, Clay, is that, we've spoke before about schoolwork and getting involved in schoolwork potentially in Australia where you are. The system in the UK at the moment is a system where sport isn't really being encouraged, and in fact, the system that is in place is the kids are doing less and less sport, which for me is very worrying, because we're having, on one hand, we have the government over here talking about rising levels of obesity and mental health issues within children, but sport over here, we're doing less and less sport. I just wonder what maybe the system is in Australia, and whether there is an emphasis within the education system to push sport. Is that a key subject in Australia? It's still considered very, very important.
Yeah, one of the subjects we have in school is physical education. So most of the time, from quite a young age, they're teaching some sort of physical education that's always outdoors or indoors playing sport like basketball and things like that. So it's getting kids involved with lots of different sports, again, for them to explore what they're good at, but also get them moving, get them healthy. And then as you get into the older years, actually there's requirements in a lot of schools to do a sport. I think it's probably more predominantly the private schools than it is the public schools. I'm not 100% sure. But basically you have to do a sport at a certain age. I think that you can swap that out for an instrument as well. So like they do give you some choice, but it might be a performing arts or a sport is something you have to do as part of the curriculum in Australia up until, honestly, I think it's up until year 11 and 12.
Really? That's very interesting, mate, because we just seem to be going in a different direction over here in the UK. And I'd read last week that in Australia they're potentially banning social media for anybody under the age of 16. It just seems like there are a lot of people in the UK that are maybe crying out for some of these systems that you have in place over there, or at least some of the ideas that maybe you have for that next generation. And it's interesting to me because I have a young boy now. He's like 2 years old. I'm already starting to think about, right, well, if he's not being exposed to too many sports when he's at school, then maybe it's my job to expose him to those sports outside of that. And I certainly see a lot of the kids that I coach recreational gymnastics. The ones that are exposed to the most sports seem to be the ones that have the most self-confidence. They're socially more aware, and it's very interesting that way. So I just wondered what maybe the sports system was like there in Australia, because obviously you mentioned that talent identification. We just don't really have anything like that. I'm being asked at the moment to, Sam, you're going into lots of schools. If you see a kid that's talented, can you maybe pick him out and point him in the right direction? But we don't have any kind of systems in place for that, and we're just kind of relying on the right kids walking through the doors of the gyms, or I guess any of the sporting arenas or federations. We're just kind of relying on the right kids coming in rather than going out and finding the kids that maybe have that base talent. Just tell me a little bit, Clay, about when I was doing my research for this conversation we're going to have. I read that you have Poland syndrome, which means that you are missing one of your pecs. I would have never known that, and I've watched you do gymnastics a lot of times, and then I went to look at a picture from you, and I was like, oh my God, that's so obvious. Can you explain what that is, Clay, and how it maybe impacted your ability to do gymnastics when you were a kid?
Yeah, so Poland syndrome is basically, as you said, I'm missing my right pectoral muscle. I've never had scans or anything to see exactly how much of the pec I'm missing, and the nature of the syndrome is that everyone is sort of affected differently. So you get people that are missing part of their pec, all of their pec. There's some people that have smaller arms, missing fingers, missing part of their arm, missing rib cages. So the range on how it affects people is very, very different. I'm lucky in the sense that it is just part of my pec. Well, I believe it's probably my whole pec major. But again, I'd have to get a scan on it. But yeah, sort of getting into sport. Both my parents are physiotherapists, so basically I was getting into sport. I didn't really know what was going on, obviously, when I was 5 years old. But as I sort of started growing up and getting, taking the shirt off in training and things like that, as we do as athletes, I started to notice it, and especially as puberty started. Obviously, there's sort of that self-consciousness that sort of kicks in, and the comparison between other people and all those sort of things that happen. So it was difficult mentally at times, for sure. I was very, very lucky with the way my parents handled it. Sort of if I came to them with issues and that sort of stuff, obviously they'd reassure me that, I'm just fine the way I am. But more importantly, if I was saying, they're better than me or they're stronger than me and that sort of thing, my parents would just reassure me and say, well, it's up to you. If you want to keep doing this, if you want to pursue gymnastics, no one's going to get their pec removed for you, mate. So how about you either need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and they are the people you're competing against, so you've got to go compete against them. Or if you're finding it's too much, you can step back. So they were firstly, they never brought it up with me until I brought it up, and I think that was really, really, really important. It never gave me a reason as to why something wasn't working until I found out for myself. And then after that, they gave me the perspective of, life's tough. So everyone's dealt different cards, and I've always had the perspective of, I was born without my right pec, but there are other people that might be born with, say less talent in certain areas, or sort of more likely to have sort of mental illness issues. And so everyone's got their battles that they're fighting. Mine's just physical and very obvious to see. So obviously it's something that we talk about. But for me, it was always just one of my hurdles that I had to overcome, just like everyone has their own. So that being said, it's it's affected different things. The ring strength, stuff like that is quite difficult.
Okay.
But it's everyone has their strengths in gymnastics anyway, so there are some people that aren't that strong. There are some people that are really strong, but they're not very bouncy on their legs. It's just trying to find your niche, find where you're strong at, and sort of mitigate the total amount of loss that you're getting from your weaknesses, and just working on them. So
did you identify those strengths that you had within gymnastics? Gymnastics is such a great sport, I think, because there are so many skills to learn, and there are 6 apparatus, and you have to master the whole of the human body. When there are kids getting into the sport, I always say, you're going to have a strength somewhere. There'll be something, whether it's being super flexible, strong, powerful, great spatial awareness, whether you're somebody that up here is able to handle pressure, whatever it might be. Were you able to identify those strengths that you had as a teenager, Clay, as you start, progressing through your gymnastics career?
Yeah, I always acknowledged I was quite bouncy and strong on my legs. So floor and vault have always been a strength of mine. It was also something that my coach was quite smart with, sort of on parallel bars. If you're doing sort of Heelys or any one arm things, I'm actually naturally more comfortable going onto my right. So I did a lot of that sort of stuff. But very early when I was learning, he was like, actually, we don't know how this is going to develop as your body matures and how, as you go through puberty. So actually switched me to my left. So now all the things that I do in one hand is on my left side, where I've got the pec, which is great. So, with the help of my parents, but also my coaches and stuff like that, not that we ever sat down and talked about it, but everyone was very supportive and we came up with strategies. But I think if we sat down and talked too much about it and hyper-focused on it, it would just be in the back of my mind all the time. And I think that's one of the things I say to people if they come to me with children with Poland syndrome or any sort of thing like that is just let them support them as much as you can, but let them find this stuff themselves. The more you talk about it, the more it's in their head, the more they start, subconsciously finding excuses as to why things might not work or work, instead of actually just pushing through and finding a way through rather than stopping it at the roadblock.
That's really interesting, mate. So Clay, are you right-handed or left-handed?
I'm right-handed.
So you're right-handed. So when you first started gymnastics, did you start doing cartwheels and things on your left or your right? Because you said there that your coach switched to your left.
Yeah, so I do my cartwheels and everything to my right. It's actually just parallel bars that we made the switch to my left, my main stuff on my left. So everything else goes towards the right. That's
really interesting, because when I teach kids, like from a young age, I teach them if they're right-handed to go left, and if they're left-handed to go right, like the opposite way around. I kind of base it off. If you're going to write your name with your right hand, this one likes to do the spatial awareness part of the movement, and this one's the solid one, which is on the table. So cartwheel like that way. That's kind of like my basis for teaching it. So it's interesting that you go on your left, but you were right-handed, but it felt more natural for you to go on your right. That's just a really interesting thing. I predominantly do a lot of like recreational coaching, and every now and then do a tiny bit of I guess what would be almost like consultancy work with like the top level. So I'm really interested in like the fundamentals of gymnastics coaching with little kids, and kind of which arm they do their cartwheel on, because like, once you've made that decision, that kind of dictates which way you're going to twist for like the rest of your whole gymnastics journey. So it's really interesting.
There's no going back.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You speak about that and the foresight of your coach there. As you start becoming a teenager, Clay, and you're developing and you're figuring out what your strengths are and you're having some success nationally and you start to think about competing internationally, can you just tell me a little bit about your trajectory up until maybe getting to that world stage?
Yeah, so I had a few little international competitions. One was the Austrian Future Cup in Linz, and that was when I was about 14 years old, I think, and that was my first international competition. And then I went to a couple other little ones, the Australian Youth Olympic Festival, competed obviously still a lot of domestic events and things like that. and then in 2014, when I was 17, I went to Pacific Rim and competed for Australia. And that sort of, if I'm honest, felt like my first international. It was a sort of under 18s event rather than the more junior levels. So that was really, really cool. And I ended up winning gold medal on vault at that competition, which was nice. But it turns out they didn't have the Australian anthem on deck. So it was the first time I get on the podium internationally, and it was just dead silent crickets instead of the anthem. So that was a bit of a buzzkill. But yeah, and then after that, I also qualified for the Australian as the Australian team. There was only one athlete, so it was just me, but went to the Youth Olympic Games in 2014. Wow. So that was awesome as well. So I made a vault final there, where Gianni, obviously you know Gianni, so he won a medal on vault, and then Nikita Nagorny won a vault medal as well. I can't remember who was. I think Nikita got third place. Gianni might have won it.
Okay.
And I came fourth. So that was my first taste of very close podium on that real high level, and then sort of kept doing those sort of competitions up until I became a senior. And I had some issues with my back and sort of had bilateral stress fractures in my back, so I wasn't able to do much for a whole 12-18 month period. And then finally got back and got on the world stage and did a couple of World Cup competitions. And the start of 2017 is sort of where my senior international career sort of kicked off.
What did you learn from, obviously, very early on, 2014, being at that Youth Olympic Games, Clay, which was, I think that was only the second Youth Olympic Games ever. So 2010 was the first one. I competed in that one. And the level there that you spoke about, obviously, Nikita Nagorny goes on to become just an incredible athlete, right? World champion, Olympic champion. Gianni goes on to become a world champion. What did you learn about being amongst those guys there, and what did that do for you, Clay, then coming back to Australia, and then as you transitioned into the senior ranks over those next few years? What had you learned about being so close to that level? I mean, finishing fourth there at a competition like that must have given you a lot of confidence and motivation as you came back to Australia.
Yeah, no, I did. I was obviously pumped about it, but being so close, I also learned my first little lesson of defeat as well there, which was really important for me. I think being so close after working so hard, it's almost like fifth and sixth is better than fourth at that point. So yeah, I sort of got my first taste of defeat and how to swallow that and get straight back into it. And I was lucky enough that without a whole lot of introspection, I was able to just get back in the gym and just get going, and it motivated me. I guess the other really important thing that I started to learn there, but I continued to learn and probably didn't really get the proper taste of it until I was a little bit older, was that everyone I was competing against were just guys. They were just dudes doing the same thing that I'm doing. So before that stage, you're looking at all these senior athletes, all these really good athletes sort of online or on videos, or you're watching them in competitions, and you sort of, I don't even know what you think, but you think these guys are robots that are just so good at this sport, and you just want to be like them. And then you go and meet them, and they're just dudes just doing the best they can, just like you. And I think that was awesome because it sort of brought the level of fear out of the sport a little bit, because you could talk with the guys, and they were still incredible athletes that are worth admiring, but at the same time allowed me to be like, oh, okay, there's no reason I can't do what they're doing. They're just normal dudes. So I think that was a pretty cool experience for me, and experiencing that not just with the gymnasts, but obviously in the multi-sport event at the Youth Olympic Games was pretty awesome to be able to meet the other athletes and stuff like that, and just it gave me a bit of a taste on what high performance sport looks like worldwide.
What are some of the challenges, Clay, as you start to make your senior debut and you're trying to break into the senior team and you start competing internationally? Is it a real challenge geographically being on the other side of the world? Because a lot of these athletes right in the UK, they can earn their stripes by going out to Germany, competing in the Bundesliga match. We're in a situation at the moment in the UK where we have a lot of depth. So there seems to be literally 20, 25 guys who are super competitive, and they all have the potential of being able to compete on the world stage, but they just can't get the opportunities to compete internationally. So instead, they're choosing to go out to Germany for 7 or 8 weekends a year, go out to France, and just learn the art of competing in quite stressful environments. Is it difficult at times being so far away from the rest of the world, just having that, I guess, interaction of competition internationally?
Yeah, it's probably one of the biggest things that we fight here in Australia is we don't have strong domestic competitions to travel and get that competition experience in stressful environments. And in order to go to any of them, you've got to fly. When you've got to fly 24 hours basically anywhere, not to mention the thousands of dollars you've got to pay. So getting that experience internationally, or even just in any sort of stressful environment as you're starting to progress through the sport, and even through your senior career, is really, really difficult. And it's something that we struggle with. And we're still trying to work out how to best do it. So, 100%. That's probably one of the biggest things that we have to come up against being out here. And I think a lot of the athletes at the World Championships this year got a taste of that, because they all had to come to Jakarta, and it's the first time that I've only had to catch one flight to go to a competition. It was 8 hours, but for me that was bliss. It was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Well, did that play a role, Clay, in your decision to go out to America and take a sports scholarship at Illinois University? Did that play a role in a way, just to get out of Australia, experience something new, maybe put yourself outside of your comfort zone and see what it'd be like training in a new environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the opportunity came up, and I was approached by one of the coaches there. And again, I was happy with the situation that I had here in Australia, but it was hard, and I was working really hard. But in a sense, it was comfortable. I knew exactly what I was doing, and to me, the way that I looked at it was, I can always come back here. So having an opportunity sort of placed on the table for me, where I could compete every weekend, I can train in a gym with 20 guys who are all going to be competitive with me, and I can get that competition experience, along with getting a degree and experiencing life outside of Australia, and learning about myself as a person. Sort of all of those factors came into play 100%. I think they've had a pretty great impact on sort of the athlete and the person that I've sort of come out on the other side as.
How difficult was it to marry the education with the training there, Clay? Were you somebody that is academically inclined to begin with? Did you take the scholarship and then the education was more of a byproduct, something that came along with it? How did you kind of approach that experience of those 4 years? Because I know for somebody like me, I just wasn't that interested in education, but I could imagine a world in which you could sell me a sports scholarship to somewhere like that, because I would have looked at the benefits of being able to take part in competing in the NCAA season and being in that environment, that competitive environment, and I probably would have just learnt to adapt to maybe the education side of things. What was your approach going into that experience?
Yeah, I'm lucky in the sense that I'm academically inclined, as far as I am able to study, and it doesn't, I quite enjoy it sometimes. But as far as making the decision to go over to the US, it was it didn't matter. It had nothing to do with my decision really at the time. In hindsight, I'm so grateful that was part of it. But at the time, it was, I'm going over here to continue my pursuit to compete for Australia, but I'm just doing it in a different environment, because I think the benefits of this environment are going to give me an edge, basically, on the guys that I'm competing against.
Yeah, and what did you learn from being around those guys there? Maybe your training partners, but also, Justin Spring was based there in Illinois. What did you learn from that environment, and maybe the way of thinking and the approach to gymnastics that was maybe slightly different to what you were used to in Australia? Was there anything that you noticed that was a bit different that really impacted your career, and that you really learnt from, that you took back maybe with you to Australia and tried to share with the lads that you train with now?
The biggest thing that I've learned and I've brought back is team culture and the importance of a team. And I think initially when I got over there, it was obviously everyone was very understanding about going to study, and if you had to miss a session and that sort of stuff, that was something I had to deal with, because back home it was no, everything comes after training. So you train, and then if you got to do something, you do it afterwards. If you have to do something and it gets into training, too bad, you're not doing it. Whereas over in America, there was a little bit more leeway, because obviously the system is they have to study, you have to get grades. So they were very understanding of that in a very, very positive way. But for me, that was difficult at the beginning, because I'm like, why are these guys coming in late? Or why are they, we need to be here to do gymnastics, you know what I mean? But learning a bit of that about that, I was able to adapt to it quite quickly. But yeah, the team culture that they have there, instilling values in the team, but also encouraging each athlete to have their own set of values that they can lean on, and figuring out your why for gymnastics that, is the engine that keeps you going. And just learning about that off the gym floor stuff that actually supports you on the gym floor is something that learned while I was there, and I continued to grow on afterwards. And in sort of hindsight, I am growing from it now just as much as I was growing from it then, because then, when you're younger, there's certain things that they go in and they might stay in your head, but you don't necessarily like grasp onto it too tightly. But I think as I get older and as I've experienced more and more gyms, I've trained in a lot of different environments now. It's sort of the one thing that I can notice that is the most important in each gymnastics environment for success of the team, of the collective, is that sort of that binding culture that everyone buys into. And if you can get that, then you really are sort of a force to be reckoned with.
Did it surprise you, Clay, how well you were able to balance the education side? Because it is pretty full on and intense when you're out there training at a college in America, and the training and still be competitive, because there's a lot of attitudes, and I would say that that's probably the way that people, the typical thought process in the UK is that if you go to university and do your gymnastics is going to suffer, right? And that's probably why most athletes choose to ditch their education at 18 and just go full-time in the UK. But I really think it's a great opportunity for a lot of those young guys that we have here in the UK that are maybe those, like I said, that those 20 guys that are nearly the top, but they're not quite there. It's a great opportunity for them to look to the other side of the pond and consider spend 4 years over somewhere else, get an education paid for, because a lot of these guys are really high-level athletes, and then come back and start your gymnastics career again, which is something that you did, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that it's not for everyone, just as nothing is. So there are certainly factors you need to take into consideration. But like I said, as far as the gymnastics coaches are concerned, they want to win, and in the American environment, they want to win real bad. So it's awesome and it's really, really competitive. But they're also understanding of the study commitments. But you've also got academic advisors that are both part of the school, but then there's a separate athletic department that has the academic advisors that allow to go in and you discuss your schedule, and they'll plan out things to avoid as much training as you can. And they really do have all the systems in place to help you make sure that gymnastics can be, the main priority. Although they always say you're a student athlete, so you're a student before you're an athlete, but really that's because the money's coming in from the university. But as far as I'm concerned, they were very, very supportive in pursuing both. And I think balance comes into play as well. I think if you just, for me, for so long, I was just so hard-headed, and it was gymnastics or nothing. And I think the balance gave me perspective, and it gave me exactly that. It gave me balance, and it gave me somewhere to go and something to do when things weren't going well. And I think that provided a good foundation for me to continue my gymnastics. And who knows? So burnout is different for everybody, but I think having that balance and having something there for you outside of the gym is actually something that can provide you with a bit of a bit of balance to get you through your career and further. Yeah.
And in between all of this, Clay, so between that 2014 Youth Olympic Games and then making your senior debut and going out to Illinois, you get a cancer diagnosis, which I couldn't believe when I read that, and it had to be removed. What impact did that have on your life? Set aside your gymnastics. And then can you just run me into your first knee injury? Because I read that you've had 5 surgeries on your knees, which is an astonishing... I grew up with a coach that basically told me to avoid surgery at all costs. So for someone that's had 6 surgeries in their life, I'm just interested in how maybe your experience with those surgeries developed over time, and maybe how having the cancer diagnosis and then that being removed at such a young age maybe equipped you to then handle the 5 knee surgeries you had following that.
Yeah, well, I was really lucky in my situation because basically I was getting stomach pain, sort of crippling stomach pain, sort of, once every 6 months for like a year and a half. But it would the first time it happened, it was crippling. I took some Panadol, took some Nurofen. I was with my mum and she wasn't going away. So after a couple of hours, she took me to the emergency room, and I got there and I just threw up everywhere. And then my pain seemed to go. So we're like, maybe I was just sick, but I felt better. But there was a 3-hour line for the emergency room. So we went home. And it was fine. And then, we leave at that was when I was still in Adelaide, and then I moved to Canberra when I was 17. So I moved over to Canberra, then probably 6 months in, maybe less, same sort of pain, and I'm getting this pain, and they sort of they remove me from my room because they think I've got some sort of gastro. They give me all the drugs for gastro. I'm sitting there, and it's like just the most unforgiving pain ever, and it just would not go away. I'm sitting there sort of grabbing my stomach, rolling on the floor, being like, I don't know what to do with this, to the point where, again, they take me to the hospital, they do a bunch of checks, sort of put me out, or sort of gave me drugs to put me to sleep. I wake up, it's gone, and they're like, we don't know what's going on. And I was like, okay, well, send me home. So then I go home. 6 months later, same thing happens. And at that point, and in between these, they've sent me to get sort of some scans and that sort of stuff. And nothing's really coming back. They're sort of not sure what even scans to give me, right? So there's not that many markers of what's going on. And then the last time they sent me to get my appendix scan, and I went to the doctors after this another really bad episode. And they're like, the scan, your appendix, it looks a little bit bigger than normal, but it doesn't look inflamed. It doesn't look like it's going to pop, all this sort of stuff. And I just said to them, you have to take, if there is a 1% chance that this pain is coming from that, you have to take it out. Like, just put me under and take it out. So anyway, I go under, and I sort of have the surgery. Mum flew over to Canberra from Adelaide for the surgery, and I wake up, Mum's next to me, we're sort of laughing, just got my appendix out, and the doc comes in, the surgeon comes in, he's like, got good and bad news. Bad news is that when we went in there, we found a 1.8 centimeter malignant carcinoid tumor. So it's a cancer. It's something that's growing. And he said the chances of metastasis, which is when it spreads, increases by 90% as soon as it gets to 2 centimeters in size. So you're very close. So we are concerned that it might have spread. So obviously here I am, just laying on the bed with my mum, having a joke around. And then next minute they've said, we've just found a cancer in your bowel. And I'm thinking, what do you mean? Mm. So that obviously was really tough to hear. But then we've removed it. We've removed a couple of lymph nodes around there. We're worried it might have gone to the lymph system. We're going to send you to get some PET scans, which is a pretty specific cancer scan. But in the meantime, I'm sort of sitting there, and mum's tearing up and crying. But for whatever reason, like, I don't know, I don't know if it was a coping mechanism or not, but I was just like, I'm good. Like, they've taken it out, I'm chilling. Like, don't worry about it. And almost felt in a position where I was comforting my mum at that point, being like, I'm going to be fine. It's no problem. Don't worry about it. And to the point where I think mum told dad, I didn't tell my brothers, I didn't tell anyone, like, no one knew about it. And I was like, I don't want to spread this news, just for the sake of it, because I might go get a scan and it's all done, you know what I mean? And there's nothing going on. Sort of ended up had to go out to Sydney and get a full body PET scan, which is sort of like this nuclear injection where they're sort of standing behind this glass thing with sort of Homer Simpson gloves on with a big nuclear injection sort of like glowing. And I was thinking, they're standing behind this big thing with rubber gloves on. What are they putting in me? But yeah, ended up getting that put in me, did the whole PET scan, and there was nothing else found. So as far as that experience, obviously it was there, but I was very lucky in the sense that it didn't progress any further than that. I also count myself as lucky as I didn't know about it prior. There was this lead in before the surgery. I had no idea it was there, and I didn't know it was there until it was gone, and I was lucky enough that it had gone. So, I mean, that was a scary encounter that I felt more like I dodged a bullet than I'd been oppressed in any way by my body or by my health. So off the back end of that, sort of got back into stuff. I sort of mentioned that I had a back injury. So that was similar sort of period. So I wasn't allowed to walk for the first little bit because it was a bilateral stress fracture on the same level. They're worried that my spine was going to have some movement if I did anything. So I was really sort of off running, couldn't really do anything. And then progressed, got back to all-round and qualified for those World Cups that I was telling you about. So I went to the World Cups in 2017, competed at Melbourne, Baku and Doha. And then off the back end of that, went to the Australian Championships. And then after that, went to the University Games. So after this pretty big event of my back and this cancer taken out of me, then sort of this big high of, okay, I'm back. But in hindsight, I got back and I just competed too many times and I had no rest during the year. And then finally went to World Championships in 2017, my first World Championships. And my floor routine, 6-pass routine, all the tumbles going well. And then sort of lining up my last tumble, huffing of thousands of people watching on. And obviously the nerves are in, but you're focused. And then I land and I just feel my knee drop in and I fall to my back and sort of I'm huffing and puffing, but I don't know what to do. My knees, I know my knee's not meant to do that. And the medical team ran on and said, what's going on? And for whatever reason, my intuition said, I said to them, I've never done it before, but I've either torn my ACL or dislocated my knee. But whatever's going on, that's what's happened. And they wheeled me off in a wheelchair, and that was that.
And what was that like? That I guess that you get to taste that thing that you've been working for so long. You know, you have those World Cups, Australian Championships, you get to the world stage, you compete in Montreal, which I imagine was a great World Championships as well, a brilliant arena, and all of those top guys of your generation are there and they're competing. That's when, again, Nagorny, Jani, I think Niall Wilson's still competing at that time, the Chinese, the Japanese gymnasts, Uchimura's still going. I think that was his last World Championships where he tried to compete and he injured his ankle, I think, or his foot. You're in that, you're amongst it, you've got to that level and then it's almost stripped away from you really quickly. What was that like, that experience of being in that wheelchair on the other side of the world and having to travel all the way back home on a plane and then find out the extent potentially of the damage? And was that battle that you faced there in that time, Clay, in those first few weeks and few months, was it more of a mental battle or a concern of, am I physically going to be able to compete again and get back to that level?
The way that I looked at it, so if we're running on the timeline, the back end of 2018, we had the home Commonwealth Games. So the next thing on my mind was, at the time I don't know how old I was. I was, just turned 20. So I was sort of roaring up to do this massive competition at home Commonwealth Games. And as an athlete, it's World Championships, Commonwealth Games, and Olympic Games as a Commonwealth athlete. They're the three big ones you want. So my immediate thought was, I'm done. I'm out for Commonwealth Games, and that was a massive hit for me because that was one of the things that were written on my whiteboard in my room since I was 12 years old, was go to the Commonwealth Games, and you don't get an opportunity to go to a Commonwealth Games very often, and I most likely won't. So that's what hit me the hardest, because it was this sort of almost in my mind this comeback story for after my back and after this surgery on my bowels. It was, that was my moment to on the home soil prove to everyone that everything that I'd sacrificed and all the people that I'd told no because I've got training, can't go to the party, can't hang out, my family, I've moved out of Canberra, moved away from my family at a young age. That was sort of the moment where I could do it in front of them, and perform for them. And that is what felt like it was stripped away from me. But I was very lucky. This first knee, I was very lucky. I got back and I had the surgery. I was back in the gym the next day. I really did not skip a beat. I don't know if it was just frustration and anger or just blind optimism at this point, but I was like, I had no concerns about getting back into things at that point. I've had the surgery and I was like, get me back in the gym. So I was back in the next day, and really the progress out of that injury was very, very difficult, as all sort of major injuries are. But honestly, I didn't skip a beat as far as the mental aspect. I was on top of it for that first knee.
And what surgery did you have, Clay? Because you can have a few different types of knee surgery when you tear your ACL, right? Which one was it that you had, and which leg was it? Which side was it?
Yeah, so I tore my left ACL, obviously did some damage to the meniscus, as most people do on their ACL ruptures. And I opted for the hamstring graft, and that was purely because the advice I'd been given from someone else, which is the advice I still give now, is once you find a surgeon that you're happy with, you do the graft that they're happy with. Because usually you ask a surgeon, like, what do you think? And they'll say, we can do this, because they're trying to appease you. But there's not enough information, there's not enough research that suggests that anyone is much better within any sort of margin of error. So my advice is always, you get the surgery that surgeon's done the most of because they're the best at it. So the graft isn't necessarily the problem. It's how good the surgeon is at doing the surgery, and he's going to be best at doing the one that he's done the most of. So I got the hamstring graft on my left side for that one, which had its own complications. Just being in gymnastics, I guess any sport, running would be a similar sort of thing. Is I didn't realize, but as you swing on the parallel bars, you swing backwards and you engage your hamstrings. You engage the whole backside of your body. So you're also recovering from a grade 3 hamstring tear as well at the same time. So obviously the ACL is much more complex and takes a lot longer to heal. So that sort of heals itself, but it has its own pains as you can imagine.
How did it help, Clay, having two parents that were physios when you were going through these surgeries and coming back? Was there any key advice that maybe, or tips or little bits of wisdom that they shared with you that would have an impact that maybe somebody that didn't have a parent that was a physio would maybe not have access to? You know, normally you go and see the physio and that's their job and they're seeing, you know, they might be seeing 20, 30 athletes a week, but I guess you've got two full-time physios there that you are their main priority. Did that help in terms of the recovery when you were coming back from these surgeries, particularly that first one?
Yeah, so I was still out in Canberra, so I was away from home, but my dad flew out for the surgery. I think that the biggest help, I can't remember any specific advice they gave me, but they're all very supportive. I think the best thing for me was knowing that I could ask any question at any time and get a very quick response. I think that was I felt really safe in that aspect, because a lot of other people, if they have a question, you know, you ring the surgeon's office, he's not just going to answer all your questions over the phone, you know what I mean? So that or your current physio, they're busy, like you said, they're treating other people. So having access to information, if I had questions about how my knee was feeling, pains, I have questions about my recovery and exercises that I've been assigned, they're just always someone to bounce ideas off of. But they were very, very much of the mindset of, you've got a physio that's managing you. He actually knows this situation better than we do. So you go to him first, and if you have questions, we'll happily answer. So they were very respectful of the physio that was managing my rehab. But it just having them there if I needed them was probably the nicest thing. Yeah.
Can you run us through the timeline, Clay, of recovering from that first surgery? And obviously, like you mentioned, I think it's a great point. You've had a skin graft there from your hamstring, so you're essentially recovering from two injuries. Just tell me the timeline, and then leading into getting back, and then the next injury that you then faced.
Yeah, so I basically signed with, at this point, not quite, but pretty much signed with Illinois at this point. So I tore my ACL, and that was up in the air as well. I was thinking, I don't know if they're still going to take me. So within, I don't know, it must have been 2 months of getting my surgery, I flew over and moved to America. So I moved to America on crutches, basically. So I was over there training and doing my recovery part with the physio that had done some stuff for me in Australia, and then also getting some advice from the trainers in America. My recovery, like I said, because I didn't skip a beat, I was so motivated and just so on top of it in those early stages. Again, I think it was just that the energy of a young athlete that's just got shit to do, and I wasn't gonna let anything get in the way. So that was really helpful. I then sort of got back into competition quite quickly. So I can't remember exactly when I first started doing skills and that sort of stuff exactly, but I did enough to qualify for World Championships the following year in 2018. So it was less than 12 months before I was competing internationally again, which means the trial must have been 1 to 2 months prior to that. So, and then prior to the trial, obviously I've got to be doing preparation as well. So I reckon I got back from that first one within sort of 8 or 9 months.
And, you know, looking back now in hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, was there anything that you would have done differently, or would advise somebody else that's maybe had a similar injury to do differently following that first surgery and that first injury, Clay? I know, look, it's a wonderful thing, right? And we're sitting here 5 surgeries later. I'm sure there are things, and you could lose your mind trying to go over those things. I've done it myself following the surgery that I had on my ankle. But is there anything you would maybe advise a younger athlete to do in that situation that maybe you didn't do, or you could have, if you had the wisdom that you have now, you could have done slightly differently?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say. It's really hard to say, but probably just you've got more time than you think. It's at the time I'm still quite young, and there's no rush. You've got time, but at the same time, if I had that mentality, I don't know if I would have got back to the position that I was in. So I think it was the Achilles heel. It was my biggest strength, my biggest weakness, that I was so motivated to get back quick. If I hadn't had that, would I have got back at all? I don't know. And so, like you said, hindsight feels 20/20, but a lot of the time you change one little variable of the past and you don't know what its trickle-on effects are. So I think that's probably one thing that, in general, not necessarily just on the knee stuff, but just really just cooling the room, put the AC on and cool down a little bit. You've got time to really look after yourself and your body and prepare and plan, but it never seems like that.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Just how common it is that after a big injury like that, and typically I think of, an Achilles, a knee, maybe a ruptured ankle, the chances of you re-injuring or having another serious injury again within that first 12 to 18 months, I think the statistics are wild at how common that is. Just tell me then how you build, you get back, you do that, you get selected for that next World Championships. How does the next injury take place?
Yeah, so I competed at World Champs 2018 and was pretty bruisey on the hardcore twisting stuff, obviously, because I was still quite early on. So I actually got through that competition fairly well. I wasn't at my strongest. I happened to qualify for the competition for my all-round score. So again, there was leeway and sort of pulling a bit of the difficulty out of my floor routine and things like that. So, but I got through that competition again without being at my full strength. Was happy enough with having got back. And then basically got back into the swing of things in Illinois. So went back to training up there. And then in the 2019 season in Illinois competition, I don't know how many competitions we've done, but a fair few competitions. And then I was on vault. And saluted for my vault, Uchenko 2.5, and felt exactly the same thing, but in my other knee. So it was my right knee this time, and it just sort of dropped out and just laying on the floor, going, well, I know exactly what I've done here. Well, almost like I knew the first time, but this time I was like, well, I'm absolutely sure of it. But at the time, the trainer sort of came over, jumped on my ankle, sort of hugging at my knee to test my ACL. I'm thinking, get off me. Get the F off me right now. Like, I know what I've done. You can test my ACL in 20 seconds. Just give me a second. So that was pretty horrible. Obviously knowing what I'd done, but the main pain there was knowing not what I'd done, but what I'm about to go through. Sort of, I'd pushed so hard and I was so motivated that first time, and you never think you're going to do it again. Although you know the statistics, it's not going to happen. And at this point, I'm past 12 months after my first ACL, so I'm actually sort of 18 months in. But you're still in that window of danger. But and who's to say? I mean, it's probably likely that sort of some sort of compensation from my left is what pulled me to my right. But again, it's really, really difficult to tell. But yeah, it was sort of then that I was, going in ignorant to the first one. It's almost a blessing because you don't really know how hard it's going to be, and each challenge kind of just pops up right in front of you, and you just have to tackle it straight there and then. But in the second one, you're like, okay, I know what this looks like. I know exactly what I'm in for here, and I know that I don't like it.
And what did you do at that point, Clay? Did you choose to stay in America? Did you fly home? What was the process this time around? Because I imagine that this time, you're very well aware of what's coming physically, but I imagine the second time around, that youthful, naive, driven motivation to get back faster than the doctors telling you can get back is somewhat tinged a little bit with I guess the realization of what is coming because you've already been through that. It's a bit like when you do a new type of conditioning that's horrendous, and the first time round I'm like, it's okay the first time because you don't know what's coming, but the second time around you're well aware what's about to happen, and it's much worse.
It's exactly the same thing. Honestly, I've felt the same thing in my strength programs too. It's the same thing. So Yeah, I mean, as you said, it was sort of, I knew what was coming. It was just, I was devastated. And obviously there was another World Championships that year, but at that point I was like, I think I was in, oh God, it must have been February, I think, in 2019. I was like, oh no, I'm not getting back for this World Championship. So that was a bit of a blow. But I think on the horizon was the 2020 Olympic Games. So again, I'm thinking, all right, so that was a bright enough light to keep me going. Obviously, I knew what I was going through, but in a way, I was able at that point to feel empowered by what I'd learned from the first time. I was very glad that it sort of, in hindsight, I'm very glad, and I was at the time, that it wasn't the same knee, because I think I would have lost a lot of trust in my body if it was the same knee 2 times in a row. So I was drawing from a little bit of strength there, going, well, at least the other one's strong. But yeah, the mental side of stuff was really difficult at that point. I was also a captain on the team, so it was difficult to then, off the back end of that, see the boys go out there and compete and go into the gym, but at the same time being a part of that environment. And we talk about this team culture, and especially being the captain of that, it gave me some purpose outside of being an athlete. I think that was really, really important. It was sort of, I was very much supported there, but at the same time, my coach, Dan, sort of, just a massive kudos to him, because he's sort of like, well, it sucks. You got this rehab to do, but guess what? You still got a job to do. You're a captain on this team. And, I think that for me was empowering, and sort of gave me purpose again. And it gave me something to actually fill my days with on top of my recovery. And then also this really bright light of the 2020 Olympic Games was sort of hovering in a reasonable distance, close enough that I could see it, but far enough away that I knew I could potentially get back for it. So this time around, again, it's sort of all these things helped me get through it. And again, they were very, very difficult, but I was still able. And it's not to say that they weren't really, really difficult times, but I was really able. I think at this point in time, my commitment to sacrifice 100% for the sport was starting to drop. And I started to feel, okay, this has let me down here a little bit. I need to start finding these other things. And that's where the introduction into this proper leadership role and finding my place in the team and really introducing this team culture stuff started to really kick in. But yeah, as I started getting back into my knee into my rehab and through this whole competition season over in America, I was getting back into stuff, and I was doing just a leg strength exercise straight up and down. I feel my knee crack, and I was thinking, what the hell is that? And then I couldn't straighten my knee and all this sort of stuff. Ended up going to the doctor, got a scan, and I ripped my meniscus off. So I had to, I can't remember how long it was. It must have been 4 months or something after my initial surgery. They have to go back into the knee and take my meniscus out. And luckily that's not a massive structural surgery, but again, that sort of just takes it out of you. It's just another hit.
Wow. And, so that's surgery number 4 altogether. Did you learn anything about, at the time when I came back from my just one surgery that I had, Clay, which seems a little bit embarrassing when you chat to someone like yourself, but, at the time I had to be in the mindset of nothing's changed, physically I'm the same, and I can get back to that level that I've been striving for. Now as a 32-year-old, having had that surgery not far off 10 years ago, I understand that I was never quite the same again. It took something from me. And cutting somebody open and going inside of them, it makes complete sense that you're never quite going to be the same again. Was there any realization after maybe surgery number 3 that maybe, given the fact that my strengths are floor and vault and my power, this might be taking something away from those strengths and the potential that I have? Or were you still in the mindset of, no, I think I can get back to that level still, because, I've seen so many athletes have ACL repairs and surgeries and still get back and win medals at the highest level?
Yeah, I think there was absolutely, there's moments where I'm thinking, oh God, like you said, it's sort of a cut me open, they've taken something here. But sort of drawing off a little bit of Stoic philosophy, it was, you got to be the hero of your own story to some extent. And I think as far as thinking about something that I've lost, I really tried to view it as this they've taken something, but I've gained something back, you know, and sort of getting through this gives me more back than has been taken from me. So again, I never really had, coming out of those surgeries, I never really had a thought of I'm not going to get back into this. This is always still there, and I guess that sort of blind optimism of like, no, I've still got this. I'm still good here. But if you then start talking into getting back into those skills and the sort of the connections, 2.5 punch, the double twist punch, double front, and like different things like this, that's when the mind games start playing. And that's not, I don't want to do this, or it's not, I'm not going to get back to that level. It's on a deeper level where your brain's like, nope, you're not doing that. And sort of the visualization game is sort of, I'm visualizing, right, 2.5 punch, 2.5 punch, and visualizing in my head, 2.5, bang, knee goes, or 2.5, or leg breaks, you know, and it's just my head just going, and it's sort of, you start to learn about this sort of stuff, because I'm very much into this visualization thing, and I'm through sports psychologists and all this sort of stuff with the high performance. I visualize myself being in my own body doing the skill. I visualize watching myself doing the skill. That was very much a part of how I trained. And then this mental stuff started to creep in. You start to get, you know, your mind playing tricks on you. This little devil starts to sit on your shoulder and goes, "Oh, do you reckon you could do it like how you're visualizing it? I'll show you how else it could go." You know, and that's the sort of, after the second knee is when those sort of things started coming into play. And that was a really interesting period where I had to learn how to manage those. And those have never stopped since. So I've been getting those little, you know, 2-second nightmares 5 times a training session ever since. And you just learn different techniques and on how to deal with it. And one of the biggest ones for me is, if I'm visualizing something, I push pause, and then I shut the window down. You know, it's like you're on your computer. If you're watching something that's not good, tap the space bar, pause it, close the tab, open a new one, start again. So, but I'm not going to go. So I'm not going to let that whole video play out, because I know how it ends. I'm going to shut it down, and then I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to watch how I'm going to do it. If that happens again, shut it down, close it, lift up a new tab, watch it again. And I wouldn't let myself go for it until I'd visualize myself doing it properly, and then hand up and you go for it, you know. And it's just sort of building those sort of techniques into my visualization game has played a massive role. But it's a scar that sits pretty thick in your mind after doing those injuries.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. I remember being 18 and going to the European Championships. One of my teammates, we were in the training gym ready to go out. He was going to compete on vault, and he was doing a handspring double pike at the time. And he did a handspring double tuck, and he did it so high. He opened up and had about 1 meter to fall, and he just landed on 2 straight legs and recoiled up like a salmon and did both of his knees, just went. And for like months afterwards, whenever I close my eyes, I just see it again, like flashbacks in my eyes. It's really interesting that you say that, Clay, because I started to notice towards the end of my career, I was a big visualizer, but I would avoid visualizing the skills that made me nervous or I was scared of, or I didn't feel so confident with. So for some reason, I still do it to this day. I've been retired for 4 years, but if I'm very, very stressed and nervous, in my head, I will go over like my routines as they were at the time before I retired, and for some reason I always start with pommel. So inside my head I'm saying shear handstand, pick up, Stockley, and I've been retired for like 4 years. I've not been on a pommel since I retired, but it's like a coping mechanism. When I'm very stressed, I do that. But I would get all the way around to bar, and when it was time to do Casina, because I was struggling with it and there was some frustration there, I would just stop, and then at that point I'd go and do something else. But it was really weird. It was like a block. It was like a mental block. I couldn't get past that. And it was really interesting that I would avoid doing that. So you just reminded me of that when you told me that story there. Is that something, Clay, that you picked up by yourself and figured out, or you worked with a sports psychologist, the pause and close the window? I've never heard anybody say that, but as soon as you started explaining that, I could see it inside my own head, and I was like, that's brilliant.
Yeah, well, it was something that I went over a lot of this stuff with sports psychs, that specific stop at playing, get rid of it and start again. I can't remember whose idea that was, but yeah, definitely would have got it from a counsellor or some sort of sports psychologist, but it stuck with me. And yeah, I do it to this day still, and it's a really useful tool. And it's a tool and you don't want anyone to have to use, but the most useful tools that we have are the ones that you know you need in those moments that you're at your lowest. And if I wanted to, my thoughts were, if I want to get back into the position where I'm competing on a world stage, I have to do these skills, and I don't feel comfortable doing them if I'm just seeing myself hurt myself. So there is only one way, and it's forward.
Yeah.
So,
and you said that you still have those like mental flashbacks and blocks and challenges to this day within a training session. You know, for people out there that have a mental block, and there's a lot of athletes, right? I'd argue it's pretty much everybody, 9 out of 10, will have an area that they have a mental block. It just kind of comes part and parcel with the sport. Would you say there comes a point, Clay, you know, you're 28 now, where you have to just accept that they're there and you learn to manage them? Or is it still worth, if you're a younger athlete, would you say, trying to find a solution to get rid of them? Does that make sense? You know, because there comes a point, like for me, for example, doing a double straight off high bar without twisting, I have to really focus, and I can do it. That's taken me a long time, but if there's any slight hesitation in my mind or anything, or I'm not concentrating, I'll drop my shoulder and do a twist. Similar to doing a Lukin on high bar, I have such a deep fear of that. It makes me go sweaty when I try and visualize it inside my head, and I just kind of like, I learned to accept those and work around them and manage them, because that mental battle was so exhausting. It would just take away from me trying to actually compete and do gymnastics. What have you learned about that? And maybe what would be your advice for someone towards their end of their career that has those mental struggles and battles still, and also somebody that maybe is a teenager or in their early 20s and still has a career ahead of them?
Yeah, I think... I think trying to work through them and get rid of them, you would be using the same techniques as to how to manage them and stay with them. So I think trying to avoid the fact they're there is the worst thing you can do. I think sort of staring the devil in the face is the best way to make them disappear or get out of your way. So I would say that attacking them head on, and whether that be, you know, a younger athlete that needs some support from coaches and things like that, to be able to learn how to, what you're explaining, sort of the twisty sort of thing. For mine, I've never had the twisties, so it's different. For the visualization piece is different, but I think the concept is the same. You need to sort of accept that there's a problem there, talk to people about it. Firstly, talking to people about it that you trust, that aren't going to make fun of you. You then realize they'll start talking about the ones that they have, and it normalize it. It's just like me going to the competition when I was younger. It's sort of, you start to meet the people and you start to learn that everyone is the same. And once you get that, it's a bit more comforting, and it lowers the temperature of the room, and it always makes the hurdles a little bit easier to jump over. But then working out techniques, whether it be the technique that I used or whether it be any number of techniques to try to get through it. So I think getting the plan to get rid of it would be the same plan that I would suggest people to managing it. Because a lot of the time, if you accept that it's going to come and you manage it, sometimes the weight of it starts to dissipate over time.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice, mate. It's absolutely brilliant. And so, Clay, you've had those 3 surgeries at this point, and the meniscus has come away. How do you then end up having 2 more surgeries? And what does your timeline look like up until this point where we're at now in 2025?
Yeah, so we, after sort of got back into stuff, obviously missed out on the 2019 World Championships, and then the university season started in 2020. In the same period of time, I'm like sort of COVID starting up, right? So we're sort of going into 2020 and all this sort of stuff's happening at the time. I'm over in America still, so COVID is I can't remember the timeline exactly when COVID hit, but it's on the way, right? Yeah. On the way enough that the Olympics gets cancelled. But there's some competitions there, but it gets postponed sort of to the next year at this point. So again, it didn't interrupt me too much, because in my head I was thinking, oh, great, another year to prepare. Like, I'm sort of not that far after my last surgery anyway. So it gave me a bit of extra time, which gave me a bit of extra confidence. We're sort of leading sort of into that 2021 period. 2020, I think we had a couple World Cups and things like that at the beginning of the year before the back end of the year. And this is sort of when COVID was, I believe the back end of 2020 or around that sort of time was when COVID, or for me, for us in America, it was a bit more like, it's over there. There's something else. It's like it's someone else's problem. And then obviously quite quickly it spread. But we get into the beginning of 2021, and so obviously at this point we're all thinking about how to qualify for the games. And I might have my timelines wrong here, but sorry, it might have been the 2020. Anyway, whatever COVID was, it might have been 19 going into 20 where the COVID started hitting. But we had World Cups that started 2020, sorry, and it was sort of again qualification for the Olympic process. And we did some World Cups and we had some domestic competitions, and it was the World Cups were sort of preparing us for one of our final sort of Olympic trials. And we did a domestic competition, which was the first Olympic trial. I flew in and, you know, aced the trial. Did really well. I think I won the all-round at that trial, which was a great stepping stone. And then we go to the World Cups and we're competing, and my shoulder was a little bit sore, and I was doing rings, and not because I'm very good at rings, but my coach was like, let's just get another sort of shot at it before we do another trial for Olympics and all this sort of stuff. So I went out and did a rings routine, did my double and landed and just felt my left knee drop in and then recoil back, laid on the mat. And it was at that moment there when the chalk is slowly flowing up after me landing on the floor, everything sort of quietens down, but I can look around, I can see, 10,000 people sort of looking down in the Melbourne arena in front of my family. It was a home World Cup. And I know exactly what's happened. And just like the room quietened down, my mind just went off and I was done. At that point, that was when I felt, this is too much. This is too much for me. And in the meantime, the physio and the doc come over and what's happened? I'm just like, it's gone. I just shut off. I'm like, done. They sort of lift me up, one under each arm. And obviously just in my angst and my frustration, my anger, I just push them off of me and I walk down the steps. As I'm walking, like sort of half walking, the knee buckles in. I just like rock, I just keep walking, buckles in again. I'm just like infuriated. I walk under, so like the crowd can't see me, sort of under the seats in the stadium, and just punch the shit out of this chalk bucket, which was on a concrete thing, just smacking it to the point where there's technicians that are managing the big screen and they're sort of freaking out because they didn't know I was there. But yeah, I knew exactly what I'd done at that point. And went and sat down in the warm-up gym, and Mum came by, and she's crying and being very, very supportive. And obviously she knows how much I've been through at this point. And I didn't feel a thing. I didn't cry. And I was at that very moment, I was like, this is going to be a problem. Mentally and physically, this is a problem. I've never felt nothing before, and I'm feeling absolutely nothing. My whole body is shut off, my emotional system, my pain, nothing. It's just, so that was, probably the most confronting moments really that I'd had ever, because not necessarily because of the injury, because of the context of how I felt. I was just thinking, what now? This is just too much. So I jump on a plane and fly back to America to get the surgery again because I'm still in college. So, but it was there and then that I was like, yeah, I'm done. I'm going to go back to college. I'll finish my degree because they're paying for it. If I'm over there, I get a free surgery. My right knee feels great, and the surgeon that did my right knee will do my left one again. So we'll get that for free, and I'll just write it out, and that was it. So I went over there with the mindset of, I'm done. I'll go be in the gym and contribute, but this is all done and dusted. And then obviously, sorry, and this is the timeline. So I mixed up the timeline before. This is when COVID is just starting now. So I get back to America, and I get my first surgery as soon as I get back, and come out of the surgery. Basically, after the scans, they've gone, okay, you've torn your ACL, you've torn your MCL, and you've just ruined your meniscus in that knee. So we're going to have to do a 2-part surgery here because we can't fix everything in one. So we're going to do one surgery and fix your MCL and your meniscus. We're going to come out, you need to recover for 6 weeks, and then we're going to take you in again and actually fix your ACL. So I get the first surgery, and then 3 weeks later, all the lockdowns start happening, and I get a call from the doc being like, we're not allowed to do surgery on the second part of your knee. So it's a quote unquote elective surgery. So we'll call you when you can get in. So effectively, I'm walking around with a half-fixed knee. COVID hits, lockdowns. I can't fly back to Australia. They evacuate the whole school. So 60,000 students turns into less than 1,000 on campus. All my teammates go. The gym shut down. I'm in a 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment that I was living with my teammates. just by myself. I'm isolated geographically from my family, socially from my mates, and emotionally completely detached from myself, in just lonely in every sense of the word. And that's when things just continue to roll down the hill that already begun rolling down.
Wow, mate, I mean, that's just the most incredible, like, turn of events. When you described there that knee injury and that feeling, I could resonate with that a lot. Just that numbness, not feeling anything anymore. I think, I've been in that position myself, and I think that was very frightening for me. Just not feeling anything, and just that pure inner rage. Being there and during COVID was such a difficult time for so many people, particularly mentally, and I'm fairly confident we're feeling the aftermath of that now still, and a lot of people still feel very disconnected from the world and the people around them to this day. What kind of a place did you end up in mentally during that period of time, and what was it like when you came out of that, and what did that journey look like then up until the point at which you're at now? And obviously you will have needed to have that second surgery. Just take us through that a little bit, and what that mental journey was like.
Yeah, it was pretty tough, pretty dark. In the previous knees, I hadn't had much problems. I felt a bit sick when I took the heavy sort of opioid pain medication and stuff. And at this point, obviously, I'd had my first ACL, and I had my second ACL and the meniscus, and then I'd had the third ACL. We're going in for the next one, but I hadn't gone in yet. So I'd had a bunch of surgeries. So I had a drawer full of painkillers, and it happened slowly, but people sort of filtered out after time. So it was like 3 guys in the team with me, and then 2, and then 1, and sort of slowly dwindles. But everyone sort of initially is going, oh, COVID's here, school's out, we're online, there's no training, like, we're on college campus, let's just drink beers and have fun. Like, this is like a boys club, right? So in the mix of everyone going through boys club initially, and obviously feeling a bit sad and a bit nervous about COVID, everyone's sort of feeling that, but they're also like, well, let's make the most of it, which again was sort of a really bad, like, it was a really bad place for me to be in. Although the guys were so supportive, and I wouldn't have lasted without them. At the same time, everything we were doing was just like so bad for my mental health when I was already in such a bad place. So there was just a lot of drinking, forgetting about stuff, about sort of what got me out of the hole the previous times. Getting back in the gym soon and having a goal, having something to go after was exactly what got me up and out of bed and back into the gym. Who knows what's going to happen? COVID's hit. We don't know when the next competitions is or the next games. I don't know when I can go home. I don't know when my next surgery is. It's like, what is there to get out of bed for? The only thing was just to hang out with the guys and have beers. And it got to the point where, like in this fifth surgery or whatever it is, I was having the pain meds, and I sort of subconsciously started taking the pain meds for the knee. But then one day I was like, oh God, like, am I allowed to have these, like, with drinks? Because I hadn't been mixing them, because I just sort of been having them before I go to bed. And then we looked it up, and it was sort of, you can't take them, like, sort of side effects, risk of death, like all this sort of stuff. If you're taking it with alcohol, there's like heaps of different side effects. And again, sort of in hindsight, but even at the time, subconsciously, I read that and went, fuck it. You know what I mean? It was just like, well, it doesn't matter. Like, and it was not I'm trying to end up, I'm trying to kill myself, but it was I'm not gonna take any precautions to not do that. If that ends up happening, it ends up happening. I don't care. Whatever you guys want to do, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take these. And it just got to a really messy place. And there was never any intent to take my life or to do anything like that. But I certainly wasn't avoiding all the behaviors that could potentially lead to that. So I got to a really, really dark place there. Again, sort of hiding my darkness with fun with the boys and doing stuff like that, but really just in this really lonely place where I had no direction. I had nothing to pursue. I was still waiting on the second surgery. The second surgery sort of ended up coming down the road, but yeah, sitting at the end of my bed, again, sort of knee throbbing, going, God, probably hungover, thinking, God, where do I go from here? Like, what am I going to do today? And it was sort of at that moment where I sort of said to myself, well, how much longer are you going to avoid what you're capable of for doing what you're comfortable with? And it was then and there where I went, all right, let's switch a gear here. Like, you got two options. You stay or you go, you know what I mean? And that was a pretty black and white decision, but that came after, I think, a couple of days earlier. I woke up in the shower, sort of vomiting blood and stuff, and I was sort of laying back in the shower, and I'd written things on the shower screen in my own blood because I'd smacked my head, and it was just a mess, mate. So yeah, basically sort of just pulled myself together and went, this isn't going to be easy, but do you it's stay exactly where you are or move forward? You've got a choice. And I decided that the moving forward was the choice, and it was still a slow burn from there. There was still mistakes I was making, and it was still difficult, but I was able to get back in the gym. Once the gym opened back up, I got the next surgery, and sort of started feeling a bit of light. At this point, I'm still in my head going, I'm retired still, but like I'll just get back and I'll get back onto my feet. So, and it wasn't until I was doing rehab on my knee and I was standing next to a boy, one of the younger guys in the gym, who'd just come back, and he was just about to jump on the P-bars, and he looked at me and goes, dude, how awesome is gymnastics? Like, how sick is the sport that we're doing? I looked up at him and said, I didn't say this, but I thought, I have never thought that in my whole life. Like, this has been my job since I was being 5 years old. I've grinded until tears, until blood, every single day, every week, for every single year of my life. And I've just been handed what I felt shit card after shit card. What am I going to do here? That's bullshit. And then I reflected on it and went, you know what? Screw that. I want that. That's not fair that I don't get to get that. I'm getting back in the gym to find that, because I'm not finishing my career on this sort of sorry Sally mode where I'm like, oh, woe is me. It's all so hard. No, if that's what I can feel in this sport, then that's what I'm aiming at. I'm not aiming at the gold medal anymore. I'm aiming at that. And that was such a massive turning point for me. And that was when I said, you know what, I'm putting the guys back on. Let's get back into this.
Oh, amazing, mate. What a story. And I relate so much. And I've seen so many athletes, Clay, that have been through setback after setback. And I think in the end, you become almost punch drunk. It's a version of self-harm because you've got no regard for your own health, and you're quite willing to, in a way, put yourself at huge risk in the gym, overtraining, doing things when you know you shouldn't be, when you're not mentally in the room, you're not concentrating. And I've been there myself, and I do describe it as a version of being punch drunk and fighting way past when you should, and putting yourself in harm's way. And I used to do that, and it was purely because I just didn't think enough of myself to look after myself. My self-worth was just so low, and it reminded me a little bit my journey to an extent there when you spoke about those times, and all you were doing there, right, when you were with the boys, was just avoiding having to deal with the reality of what you had to face. And I'm sure that was that fear of knowing what was to come again, right, like for the fifth time. But what an amazing moment for that lad to have said that to you, for you to have that realization. I had a similar situation where I was foam rollering at the end of a session. I reckon I was 26 or 7, and there was 2 kids, and they were stood on the end of the trampoline, and they were watching my coach Sergey push the pad in on high bar. And the little boy, and they were about 5, the little boy said to the girl, "What's that man doing?" And the little girl said, "He's a wizard. He can teach you how to fly. I've seen him do it before." And I watched this interaction, and it's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And I was like, that's what it is. Like, that's why I'm doing this. It's not and I made the big mistake that most athletes do of just measuring my career off whether I won an Olympic gold medal or not, and that was all my self-worth was tied to that. And it's so like there's just nothing. There's no real substance to that, and it's great to hear that you. I'm so glad you had that moment after everything you went through, and then in the end you do it. because you love it, and it becomes a journey of exploration. Like, what is possible? What can I do? And following all of that, mate, you go to the Commonwealth Games in 2022, and you have a brilliant competition. Just maybe tell me about some of the moments that stand out from you from that competition and your performances, and what it was like. You qualify there for a floor final after everything that you went through, and what was it like performing that routine on that stage at that Commonwealth Games that you missed in the Gold Coast? Just maybe tell me about that.
Yes, I made a bit of a pact with myself that I was only gonna continue to the sport as long as I was driving for, exactly what that dude said in the gym. So qualifying for the Commonwealth Games was sort of this result that came from just trying to enjoy my gymnastics more. And obviously, there's still hard days, you're still working hard, you're still sacrificing, but it had a different feeling tone to it. And I wanted to make sure I remembered that. I mean, the Commonwealth Games for me was just symbolic of so much. It was just coming back after the first ACL. That's what I missed out on. So being able to do this competition was awesome. It's sort of what I felt like was the end of my comeback story. Like, if I can just get there. But anyway, I was thinking, I have to enjoy this. Like, if I'm not enjoying this competition, I don't want to be there. And the one thing that makes you not enjoy things is when your head isn't actually there. It's 20 minutes back or it's 20 minutes forwards. It's like it's not in the moment. So I actually made a strange decision, but honestly, it's been awesome to talk about. I wore a cork hat. So Australians are known for cork hats, where they have like the corks dangling off, and it's to keep the flies out of your eyes. I ended up buying a cork hat and was like, I'm going to wear that on the gym floor if I make a final, to remind myself and to make sure that you can't take yourself too seriously when you've got a cork hat on, first and foremost. Secondly, it's smacking your face. It's reminding you what's here right now. I don't have to think about what's going to happen after the end of my floor routine. It's not. I'm not thinking about the mistakes I made in the previous. I'm not thinking about my nerves. I'm just being here. I'm just feeling what it's like to be in this moment and to just really appreciate. So that was one of the things I did to make sure I stayed in the moment. And I really lived up to that. It's just the most enjoyable competition I've ever had. And like you mentioned, I made a floor final. I also made an all-round final. I also made a high bar final. But the floor final, again, I made mistakes in the floor final. I got off, and obviously the initial disappointment's there. But 5-10 seconds, I'm just the smile's back on my face, and I'm going, you know what, this is bigger than that. So there was just a real cool moment there for myself. And I guess one of the things that I learned off the back end of sort of all this leadership, team culture things, and going through all these injuries while I was over in America, was again this contribution to a team. So one of the things I'm most proud of from that competition, along with making those 3 finals, was Tyson Ball, who I'm sure you're aware of. He's made Olympic final and multiple high bar finals at World Championships. He made a mistake in his qualification on high bar, and I was qualified in I can't remember what place, but he was first reserve. And he's ultimately a better high bar worker than I am. But I qualified for the final. He didn't make mistakes, right? And I'm sitting there thinking about the opportunity. I've competed in an all-round final. I competed in my pet event final floor already. And I'm thinking, this is a really cool opportunity for me to speak or to act out what I speak to my team in Illinois about, being the captain, what I speak to them about selflessness, about providing an opportunity that could change someone's life, giving back to the gymnastics community, giving back to Tyson, who's been such an amazing support for me. And I ended up deciding to withdraw my name from the high bar final so that he could compete in it. And that was a gift that is, one of the greatest gifts I've ever been able to give, because he went out and it was always, I'm not giving you this final to put pressure on you to get a medal. Just go out there and have fun. Just that's the only way you can honor me properly, is I give you this gift. Just go enjoy it. And he went out there and absolutely smoked it and came second and got a silver medal. So along with just being able to go through the competition and really do myself proud on staying in the moment and staying happy and enjoying myself, and almost doing that, the other teammate that told me about how awesome gymnastics is, doing him justice for the lessons he'd taught me, I was also able to give something back to Tyson. I just that was an incredible moment for me that I won't ever forget that. And it's just, that's one of the best gymnastics achievements that I've ever had, and it's nothing to do with a medal.
What a story, mate. And when you sit there and you listen to your whole story from start to finish, you have every right to be angry and bitter and twisted, and to have let life make you a pessimist and be somebody that is a glass fully empty rather than a glass half full. And what a story that is, mate. And I do think that you have a choice, right, every day when you wake up. And I think choosing to have a positive mindset is a choice. It's, the people that I know in my life that are the most positive are the ones that have been dealt the shittiest cards. And so they're definitely making a choice to be positive and be that person that, brings people up and is that energy when they walk into a room, they light it up, right? And everybody wants to be there. And there's some people walk into a room, everyone wants to leave, right? And I've been that person at times. I know that I have, and I try really hard now to be positive when I have the opportunity. So to have heard you just share your story with us today, and let's just talk about the way that it finished, mate. Just incredible. I've been smiling through this conversation. I think you're an incredible guy, and you have a lot to give back in whatever role that takes. What are your plans for the future, Clay? Obviously, we've got an Olympic Games coming up in LA 2028. You'll be well aware that whenever a country has the opportunity to host an Olympic Games, they seem to do very well, and all of a sudden the funding pours back into the sport. And whether you look at Greece, them winning a gold medal on rings, Dimitrios Tampakos, whether you look at Beijing and the success China had, winning nearly all of the gold medals, London 2012, the GB men, and Beth Tweddle doing so well, and so on and so on and so on. The Brazilians in Rio on the floor with their medals, like, it kind of it's all roads lead to that moment in time. What are your plans for the future, and what would you like to do, and what are your hopes as Australia builds up towards an Olympic Games in 2032?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm sort of I'm not taking it year by year, but I'm taking this cycle as it is. So basically, the goal for me, obviously, next year is Commonwealth Games again. So to be able to go to a second Commonwealth Games is a real massive goal of mine. So just making sure I'm fit and healthy and ready to put up a good team result at Commonwealth Games. So we probably should have won a medal at the last Commonwealth Games as a team. So that's something that would be great to do together. And sort of for me, the team aspect is exciting the most. Like, if we can stand up there together as a group, it's pretty awesome. But again, sort of the underlying tone of enjoying my gymnastics as much as I can, but that's also helping me become a better gymnast anyway. So yeah, just really pushing as much as I can while still enjoying myself, making sure my body's healthy, which is relatively at the moment, given my age in the sport. But yeah, pushing to LA 2028, and then beyond that, we'll see what happens. I'll sort of judge that when it comes. But yeah, 2032 is very, very exciting for Australia, and I'm pumped for Australian gymnastics. There's some incredible athletes coming out. We've got Jesse Moore, who is just an absolute weapon, and he just does not seem to stop getting better. And I'm so pumped, and he will be leading the charge here in Australia, and he will be a name to be reckoned with come the LA 28 Games, or even this year. He's ready, but I just have no doubt that he's just going to keep getting better and better. So seeing him, he actually trained. I don't know how many years younger than me, but 5 or 6 years younger than me. And he was a junior athlete in my gym in South Australia. So he was sort of watching me train as a senior athlete, and now he's overtaken me. And it's just awesome to be a part of that and to share team experiences with him. But yeah, he'll be leading the force of Australian gymnastics into 2032, and I think there's some really, really awesome stuff going on here. So I'm pumped to be a part of it as much as I can be, and to contribute as much as I can be, but for the times that I can't be, just to watch and enjoy.
Yeah, amazing, mate. Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I'm very excited about the Australian men and what they're going to do over the next 2 Olympic cycles. I'm kind of watching from afar, and I spend so much time now watching gymnastics, kind of studying the sport again like I did when I was a kid. And I think is it James Biscetti that does those really amazing edits online? Yeah. And I commented recently, if you could invest in Australian gymnastics men's stock, I would be doing it right now over the next 7 years, because my expectations are that you guys are going to continue to improve and build that depth, and with a with an Olympic Games coming, I'm imagining that you're going to start, with sport being such a big part of Australian culture, I imagine that funding will come in. I imagine that the coaches will start moving in. That knowledge will move around the world, down south to the very bottom of it, and I'm expecting some big things for you guys, and I think you can be a massive part of that, mate. You've got so much to teach people. For people that want to follow your journey, Clay, particularly over here, maybe in the UK, with the Commonwealth Games next year coming to Glasgow in 6 months' time, it'll be hopefully great to see you there. If you're part of that team, I'm sure Hamish will be super excited for that. Again, I can't wait for him to listen to this episode. What an incredible story you've had, mate. Where can people follow your journey, Clay, moving forwards?
At the moment, mainly just Instagram, which is Clay Stevens, Stephens, and the Clay's got an extra Y on there. So just following what I'm up to on social media. I try to post as much as I can. I'm probably not as diligent as I should be, but that's probably the best place to find me at the moment. Amazing,
mate. Clay, thank you so much for sharing your story, and we really appreciate it, mate. It's been an absolutely brilliant conversation, a great way to close out the year for us, and heading into next year, that Commonwealth Games. Wishing you all the best, mate. But you've already, you've proved everything you need to yourself. So everything after this is just a bonus. You're in bonus time now, so just enjoy it, mate.
Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome, mate. Thank you.